Hi everybody, good morning. It's been a long time since I made a YouTube video. I have been very busy with life. Things are popping along here at Free Haven. And really, what is there to talk about? Alright? For those of you who are sharing like pro-Russia memes and pro-Ukraine memes, I just want to remind you that both Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, they're both members of Klaus Schwab's World Economics Forum. So in a in a battle that's basically infighting, a power play between globalist elites who want the Great Reset, does it make sense to support one globalist elite over another? The alternative media kind of puts Putin across as the socially conservative-based person, and I don't know how true that is. If you look at some of the laws in Russia, I don't really buy it. What we have is the mainstream media pushing a certain type of person into supporting Ukraine. But by that I mean not even Ukrainians, because they're the ones suffering here, but the Ukrainian puppet government the United States installed in 2014, which resulted in the death of 10,000 people. So they're trying to get a certain type of people to support the Ukrainian puppet government, and the alternative media, which is not alternative at all, it's just yet another head of the mainstream media at this point, is trying to get people to support Russia, another globalist government. So, Vladimir Putin wants the Great Reset just as badly as Klaus Schwab does. Anyways, all that aside, it doesn't make sense to take one of the approved sides. All right, being pro-Russia, and you can understand why the conflict happened. You can understand what happened with the United States-backed coup in 2014, the color revolution crap, leading to certain types of aggression against Russia, violation of treaties that were signed after the Cold War, preventing former Soviet bloc countries from entering NATO, and then NATO later courting those countries to join them, which they weren't supposed to do. You can look at all this stuff that happened leading up to the conflict, and you can understand why it happened, but that doesn't mean you have to pick one of the approved sides, the mainstream media approved side or the alternative media approved side. You can simply observe and see what's happening, understand what's happening, see through the media's lies, and it can end there. You don't have to be pro one globalist billionaire versus globalist multimillionaire or whatever. Anyways, what else is there to talk about? Alright, so we're planting a lot of fruit trees at Fruit Haven as usual, and we're building some houses. Things actually kind of died down for a while last year, and there's kind of a lag time. Obviously there was travel restrictions and stuff, and actually a lot of people were still coming here during the travel restrictions, but still after a while that died down a little bit. We had kind of a lull in activity, not many people buying land for a few months, not many people starting house projects or things like that for a few months, and then all of a sudden Ecuador made the vaccine mandatory to enter the country for 2 months, and then that was struck down. And all of a sudden, there's a huge explosion of activity at Free Haven, where there's like 4 people buying land at once, and we're starting a few different house projects, and so things are swinging again, and that's great. Not sure what that means for geopolitical stability. I think people are seeing what's happening in the world, what happened with COVID, now what's happening with this whatever nonsense that's going on, and they're like, well, maybe I should get my remote jungle resort in the tropics figured out in case I need to utilize that option, right? So, there's that, and then what else I was going to talk about? Oh yeah, so about the vaccine thing, I don't remember if I really talked about that in detail, but what happened in Ecuador. It was kind of like, like in Australia, the Australians got out on the streets and they're just like protesting the government in huge numbers, and other countries in Europe and stuff, just millions of people out on the streets, and the police just battering the crap out of them, and it accomplished absolutely nothing. The global elites only gave up on COVID when they were good and ready to, and it was time to switch to a different narrative. And yeah, I'm sure the protests informed them that it was ready for the public to switch to a new narrative, and the public gobbled up the Ukraine narrative very quickly, like the well-trained peasants that they are. But I don't think they were really the reason for it. I think the global elites were planning on doing that pivot all along. They knew it was going to happen. Maybe a few of them were deluded enough to think they could keep the COVID thing going for another 5 years, but Most of them probably knew, okay, it's time to do Ukraine, it's time to do our next thing now. So, anyways, that happened in those other countries, like millions of people basically just wasting their time getting beaten by police on the streets and tear gas. And in Ecuador, there was virtually there were some protests, sure, against the vaccine mandates, but very few, very small groups of people in just a few of the major cities, right? But yet they managed to overturn the vaccine mandate for entering the country and entering certain institutions within the country in a matter of 2 months, right? So how is that, right? I don't know. It's something with Ecuadorian culture. Maybe the globalists just don't care about Ecuador. They didn't push very hard. Maybe they had sold enough vaccines in Ecuador to the government. They didn't feel like whatever. All I know is it happened that way. And really, there was a lot of legal action being taken. And so right away, December, January, people started filing lawsuits against the federal government in Ecuador, the national government, against the COE board, which is basically the emergency committee that was supposed to manage the COVID response. They were filing lawsuits against those people, and little by little, there was probably at least 12 that I remember reading of legal action cases. There was constitutional protection actions, and they were in the court system, but it takes time for these things to be reviewed. Even the Constitutional Court takes a month to review executive orders, and we were kind of waiting for those things to play out. We thought the government would keep the vaccine mandate in place until those things played out. The government didn't even want to wait for the leak because they probably knew that they were going to lose. There were so many cases and they were so well written. And the final thing that I read, which was barely covered in the media at all in Ecuador, the Ecuadorian news media, I'm surprised that I found it, but there was a mention that the National Attorney General had filed a criminal case against the president and the head of the National COE board regarding the vaccine mandates. Criminal charges against them, right? That's crazy, and that didn't barely even make the news. A few days after that, that was it. No more vaccine mandate. And it was mentioned in the news, part of the thing was like, oh, we need to do it to revamp tourism in the tourism sector. But 2 months before that, they didn't care about tourism. They knew it would destroy tourism. They did it anyways. And it did destroy tourism, except for Fruit Haven, because people who come here don't care and they just use, magical papers. They don't, whatever. There are some people that did get the vaccine and now regret it, and they travel around the world with their real vaccine certificates, but then there's a lot of people that during that time, they have problems walking because their testicles are so large. They just make a magical piece of paper that says they got vaccinated, and it works at all the airports. So now you don't really need to do that anymore at a lot of places because it's not necessary in a lot of countries anymore. Anyway, so that's what happened in Ecuador. The government was scared. They didn't even want to wait for these court cases to play out. They just scrapped the mandate to enter the country. So now you don't need the vaccine to enter you don't need a piece of paper saying you got the vaccine to enter Ecuador. That only lasted for 2 months. In my opinion, that's amazing news for Ecuador. A lot of people are like, well, this country doesn't require the vaccine. Ecuador sucks because they did that. In my opinion, it's actually better for Ecuador that they did the mandate and then canceled it, because that shows you that crap like that is not going to last in Ecuador. And I know a lot of people don't know the history of Ecuador, but in the last 50 years, they've deposed of a huge number of presidents. There have been a huge number of revolts, revolutions, not really like dangerous ones, just people get really pissed at a certain president, they take to the streets, the president leaves office because they don't want to deal with it. So Ecuadorians don't have, it's funny because in society they're like exceedingly polite, but at the same time they don't want to put up with crap from the politicians, so if something gets too bad, there's just a little bit of resistance and the entire government changes. Except for with Rafael Correa, which was unfortunate recently, but he was probably put in place by Soros and those guys. Anyways, enough about Ecuador and the vaccine mandates. And now we're just waiting for them to get rid of the PCR test requirement to enter Ecuador, but it's also so easy to have a magical piece of paper saying you got a PCR test. We assume at some point they probably just forgot about it, and in a month they're going to revisit that. The tourism ministry is going to be like, well, it costs people like $100 extra to fly in and out because we require this test. We need more tourists, so let's get rid of this test requirement. It'll be fine. But anyways, now it's got no problem. Now we're getting tons of people coming to Fruit Haven. Again, the PCR test requirement doesn't seem to have affected our numbers. The vaccine thing did affect our numbers a little bit, but not much because, like I said, a lot of people have massive cojones, and they just don't care. Anyways, what else is there to discuss? I said like 6 months ago I was going to do a fruit tree update tour of my property here at Fruit Haven, my homestead, and I haven't done that yet. But everything else is growing really well. I mean, everything is growing really well. It's amazing. My rabbits are growing really well. Haven't really made a video of them yet, but one of these days, make more videos about everything that's going on here. And people always ask like how many people are there right now. I don't know. We used to count, but what is like? I would say there's always between 15 and 30 people at Fruit Haven. And then there's a similar number at Terra Frutis and Evolution Eco Village. So there's a community of usually between 50 to 75 people in this area of people like us, mostly foreigners, doing our thing, whatever our thing is. And there's differences between Terra Frutis, Fruit Haven, and Evolution Eco Village, which is great because there's different people in the world. So different types of people like different types of communities. And all three communities, we kind of make fun of each other sometimes, and that's good. Sometimes people get carried away and take the criticism too far. Whatever, it happens. People are, prideful. Sometimes I wish I could go on for 2 hours, like some of these podcast guys, the Barricade Garage channel on YouTube. This guy who is like a mechanic. And he just makes videos. He'll just talk for an hour and a half. And if you get what he's saying, it's just riveting. You just listen for the entire time, right? There have been a few of his podcasts where I just have to... And I'm not a podcast kind of person. I hate listening to podcasts. I can't stand someone talking for 2 hours. The Joe Rogan Experience I can never handle, partly because I realize he's just a shill. I can't do that. But every once in a while I can handle, that Barricade Garage, and then... Dr. Garrett Smith, his Love Your Liver podcasts. He's the vitamin A toxicity guy. The two podcasts that are actually riveting enough, podcast or video, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, that are actually riveting enough for me to listen to the same person talk for an hour and a half. I just forget what I'm going to say after a few minutes. After 2 minutes, I'm just like, there's a lot of stuff I could talk about right now. Anyways, if you haven't checked out on YouTube, the Nutrition Detective channel, Dr. Garrett Smith, you can check out his website also. Really the best thing to do is search for a video called Vitamin A is Toxic or something like that, and there's an interview of Dr. Garrett Smith with some health podcaster guy talking about his vitamin A toxicity theory, and you can also read the ebooks of the guy who originally discovered this. And it's really I don't want to really spoiler right now. It's just really interesting to get into this, and you start to realize how many health problems are actually caused by something that's called a vitamin, but isn't really a vitamin, right? Vitamin A is added to all these foods nowadays. It's fortified in everything, and people are encouraged to eat like cod liver oil and fish oil, all this stuff that nobody ever really, you know what I mean? Like 100 years ago, nobody was taking cod liver oil as a supplement. Now everybody's taking 10,000 internal units of vitamin A a day. It's terrible. It causes birth defects in pregnant women. Anyways, could go on and on, but basically people are overloaded with this thing that's not really a vitamin. And the cells use retinol in very small amounts. That's another thing about, the paleo primal diet people. That I know in the past I made some videos somewhat critical of veganism and raw veganism and some long-term health problems and stuff. And I haven't made any of those videos in a while just because I haven't felt inspired to. I think it's great to make those videos because some people get triggered and it kind of causes them to think, because people who are in the vegan movement and the raw vegan movement kind of accept a lot of nutritional dogma at face value because it feels right to them and they can ascribe spiritual things to it and they just don't question it at all. But me being here, I've seen all these people, hundreds of people, for many years, living with them and seeing their dietary choices and habits and how it affects them, and I have a different perspective. So, anyways, one of the things that I could say that is a problem with both a raw vegan diet and a paleo primal diet is the pushing of vitamin A or its precursors, different carotenoids like beta carotene in foods. And so we have people doing carrot juice fasts on a raw vegan diet and their skin turns orange, and that just means your liver is incredibly toxic. And it doesn't just go away the next day. Oh, your skin's not orange anymore a few days after your carrot juice fast, so you're good. No, it's not like that. Your liver is still chock full. You did something bad, So anyways, both the paleo and the primal and the raw vegan, fruitarian, whatever diet, they're diets that people start and right away they have an extreme health improvement, right? You start a fruitarian diet and within a week you're just a totally different person, right? or you start a paleo diet, and then it's like people are like, wow, I solved all these health problems, right? The problem is, in these movements, like in the paleo and primal movement, there's a lot of people pushing snake oil, aka fish oil. They're pushing fish oil, vitamin A, high dose, extremely toxic vitamin A supplements. They're pushing organ meats, right? The first time my cat ever ate a mouse, we have a cat at the Free Haven One community house. He just moved in one day, didn't ask, just showed up. We're like, okay, we have a cat now. When he was really young, he couldn't hunt. He should have been still feeding from his mother, but she abandoned him. But anyways, just another story for another day. The first mouse he ever ate, he ate everything except for the liver. I walk into the room and I saw him eating the mouse, and a couple hours later I walked back because it took him a long time to eat the mouse because he was a small cat. And there's this little tiny blip on the floor, and I looked at it. I was like, what is that? That's a liver. That's a mouse liver. It's very obviously a mouse liver if you know what a liver looks like. A mouse liver. He literally ate everything except this one tiny little thing that was the liver, right? Because the livers taste freaking disgusting, right? It's an acquired taste. You have to, I don't know. Anyways, so they push organ meat consumption, specifically liver and other organs that can be high in vitamin A, but the liver is like the sewage waste treatment plant of the body, right? It absorbs toxins, especially retinol, vitamin A, retinoic acid, and then other glyphosate and a lot of other toxins, and then slowly pushes them out in the bile, and they get eliminated through the colon. So why would you eat that? Why would you think it's healthy? It's stupid, right? I was just reading something the other day about how the English royal family had serious problems with eczema and other things that are symptoms of in the 1800s, serious problems that were basically listed symptoms of vitamin A toxicity. And they ate a diet very rich in soft organ meats. It was very popular during that time. In the United States, organ meats were pushed heavily during World War II. It's like, nose to tail carnivore thing, but back then it wasn't like a diet fad. It was like, oh, support the war efforts. They pushed all these recipes for kidney stew and liver or whatever, dumplings and stuff like that because, the reason was because there's economy issues and supply chain issues, and they needed to export a bunch of meat across to Europe to help the soldiers, whatever they were doing over there in the globalist theater in World War II. Anyway, so they needed a way to get people to start eating lots of organ meats, so they pushed it on the population as like a healthy thing, and it's stuck ever since then, but it's really just a terrible idea. So that's why, so people will start the raw vegan diet and they'll do amazing, and then a few years, sometimes like 5, 6, 7 years later, they'll start to go downhill and have all these problems. And then people will start, also start the paleo diet and the same kind of thing. They'll feel amazing, and then some years down the line, they'll start to have some problems, or some of the health problems they had that started to go away don't really go away completely, and they're like, well, I thought this was the miracle diet, and they start having a whole bunch more problems, and a lot of these people are eating lots of liver and taking vitamin A supplements. And then the raw vegan diet, people are eating massive amounts of extremely inflammatory tomatoes, which have huge amounts of beta-carotene. Tomatoes, red peppers, carrots, brightly colored food, which is supposed to be a symptom of a sign of toxicity in nature. And only 20, 30 years ago, we start to be propagandized with this: eat the rainbow, eat lots of brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Anyways, I could go into about this forever and ever and ever, but I really think it's something interesting looking into, because it's also something that ties both polar opposites of like the raw vegan world and the paleo primal diet world. Where it's like, in both of those worlds, if you're consuming lots of vitamin A or provitamin A, the precursor, like I said, not a vitamin. According to clinical studies, it's really not a vitamin. It's a toxic substance that your cells can use in very small amounts. So it's being pushed in both those worlds, in both those diets, to consume very large amounts of something that's not a vitamin. And if you read into this, and I highly suggest you read into it if you're really interested in long-term health, you're going to find a lot of interesting things, a lot of scientific studies, tons and tons of scientific studies. You're going to find really bizarre things, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. How did you know they were involved? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, remember in the 90s they were funding GMO rice that had beta-carotene, and they were like, because all the kids in Africa are deficient in vitamin A, so how do we get them to get vitamin A? We GMO beta-carotene rice. Okay? People in Africa are not deficient in vitamin A. Okay? I don't want to swear. That's bull excrement, all right? That's not true at all. Not true at all, especially when you look at liver biopsy studies. They're not. It's simply not a thing. Okay, it's not a problem. So, and I've even seen a study from the WHO saying that. But the WHO is also one of the organizations pushing vitamin A into people in Africa, acting like this epidemic in Africa, vitamin A deficiency. It's simply not. Okay. So why is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation putting this chemical in rice that's a known toxin that causes all these health problems into a population of poor people who don't know any better, but who aren't deficient in this thing to begin with? You get into this huge rabbit hole. It's crazy. All right? That's all I'm going to talk about. It's been 20 minutes now. I don't want to talk for 2 hours. So we are doing the Amazon Fruit Festival next year, 2023, January 17 to 23, same dates as this year. Hopefully y'all can make it. We are COVID refund policy this year was wildly successful in that we are having to give like 7 or 8 refunds for people who bought a ticket but then couldn't make it because some rules were changed and they couldn't fly. They didn't want to fly with a fake certificate or whatever. So because their balls are just a little bit smaller than the people who did, so they can walk easier. Did not have this huge mass between the legs, but they couldn't come to the festival because of that slight issue. So unfortunately, but anyways, because we're so great, we had this refund policy, and now we can refund people, and we're a little bit late in getting the refunds out, but that's just how things are. In the end, people are getting their money back, and that's great. So this next year, is it still going to be a COVID refund policy, or can we do like a nuclear war refund policy, or like a social credit score system if they implement the Great Reset in November and half the people who want to come to the festival can't fly because of their social media posts? Maybe that's what we'll have to do this year instead. Maybe we'll just do a government doing stupid things refund policy. If you can't fly to the fruit festival because your government did something stupid and your social credit score is too low to fly, you don't support Ukraine enough on your Facebook profile, then we'll refund you. Maybe we'll do something like that. We'll see. But anyways, you should buy a ticket, come down to the Amazon Fruit Festival, January 2023. Of course, anytime you can just come to Terra Fruitis in Fruit Haven and rent a room. Volunteer, buy land, start a homestead, build an underground bunker, whatever. That's all I got to say for now. Have a good day, folks. Check out fruithaven.org, terrafruitis.com, and also my own website, yourbrainonfruit.com, which, I don't update that much, but it's got some interesting stuff on it, Questions and comments below the video.